This is the story of a 17-year-old boy. But if you think this is a story about fear, you're already wrong. If you think it is about a boy running for his life, you are closer, but still not close enough. And if you think it is about hunters chasing their prey, then you do not yet understand who is truly being hunted. His name was Zola. They caught him before sunrise, when the land still belonged to shadows. The fog lay low over the ground, thick and unmoving, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Ashford Plantation slept behind them, unaware, or perhaps unwilling, to know what was happening at its edges. Zola stood in the middle of 5 armed men. Chains wrapped his wrists, cold and heavy. Mud clung to his bare feet. His shoulders bore the quiet memory of past punishments, old scars layered over older ones. When one of the men struck him with a whip, only once, Zola did not cry out. He barely flinched. That silence unsettled them more than screaming ever could. 17, maybe, one of the hunters muttered, circling him. Skinny. Won't last a day out here. Another laughed. Won't last an hour. Zola kept his eyes lowered. He did not look at their guns. He did not look at their faces. He counted. 3 steps between the first and second man. The one on the left favored his right leg. The one behind him breathed too fast. The leader touched the knife at his belt every few seconds, as if afraid it might disappear. Zola memorized everything. They began marching him south, away from open fields and into land that grew darker with every step. The ground softened. Water pooled beneath thin layers of grass. Trees twisted upward, their roots exposed like fingers clawing out of graves. The Okefenokee swamp waited ahead. The men pretended not to notice. You ran the wrong way, boy, the leader said after a while. Nothing out here but rot and death. Zola stumbled. Not because he was tired. Not because the chains were heavy. Because he wanted to. His foot slid into the mud, and he fell hard. Chains clattered. One man laughed loudly and yanked him back up by the collar. Clumsy fool. Zola let his hands shake. He let his breathing quicken. He let fear paint his face. He let them believe. What none of them knew, what no one on the plantation had ever known, was that Zola had walked this land long before he ever tried to escape. At night, when others slept, he listened. Old men whispered in broken fragments. Women sang songs that were not songs at all, but instructions hidden in rhythm. Stories passed quietly from mouth to ear, about water that moved against itself, ground that swallowed men whole, places where sound lied. Zola learned to see without being seen. He learned which birds warned and which stayed silent, which mud held weight and which pulled you under. He learned how fear sounded before it spoke, and he learned patience. As they pushed deeper into the swamp, Zola began leaving signs behind him. Broken reeds, disturbed water, a torn strip of cloth caught deliberately on a branch. Messy, obvious, the kind of trail a desperate boy would leave. Inside his mind, a map unfolded. 3 miles ahead, the land narrowed. Water funneled inward. Trees grew so close together that rifles would become useless. A bottleneck. His grandfather had spoken of such places in a voice barely louder than breath. In war, the old man had said, you don't defeat the enemy by strength. You defeat him by letting him step where he should not. The hunter stopped to rest as the day grew heavy. Insects returned in clouds. One man slapped his neck in frustration. I hate this place. The leader spat into the water. That's why they think it'll save him. He shoved Zola down onto a fallen log. Sit. Don't even think about running. Zola sat. He hummed quietly, low, almost soundless. A tune his mother once sang while working. To the men, it meant nothing. To the swamp, it was a greeting. As they moved again, their formation loosened. One man drifted too far ahead. Another lagged behind. Their confidence began to rot, slow and invisible. By late afternoon, the land tightened around them. The air felt heavier. Sound behaved strangely, echoing when it should not, vanishing when it should. Even the hunters felt it now. Something's wrong, one muttered. Zola stumbled again, harder this time, pulling 2 men off balance with him. Enough, the leader snapped. Keep your eyes open. They stepped into the narrow path just as the sun dipped low, turning the swamp red and black. Trees closed in on both sides. Water deepened beneath their boots. This was the place. Zola raised his head for the first time. His eyes were calm. He screamed, sharp, panicked, perfectly wrong, and pointed into the trees. Something's out there. The men spun, guns raised, hearts pounding. They did not see Zola's fingers tighten around the rusted chain. They did not hear the soft break of iron beneath the water. When the chain finally gave way, it did not snap loudly. It whispered, and Zola disappeared. Not forward, not backward, down. The swamp swallowed him whole. Gunfire exploded. Men shouted his name as if shouting could bring him back. Bullets tore bark and water, finding nothing. The swamp remained silent. Because this was not an escape. This was preparation. And the men who believed they had captured a boy had just stepped into a war plan long before they arrived. The swamp did not scream. It only watched. Zola had vanished beneath the black, oily water. The hunters yelled and cursed, their voices bouncing off the trees in unnatural echoes. Rifles barked, flashes of fire cutting through the shadows, but every bullet found nothing. Bark, mud, water, then nothing. Only ripples that moved against the current, subtle and deliberate. He went under, one of them shouted, panic rising in his voice. Spread out, the leader commanded, though doubt now colored his words. He had never felt the swamp this way before. Not when he was walking confidently through the plantation fields, not when hunting ordinary fugitives. They fanned out clumsily. Boots sank into the mud, pulling curses with them. One man jabbed his rifle into the water where Zola had disappeared, stirring a cloud of silty rot. Nothing surfaced. No body. No blood. Only water swallowing their mistakes. Zola, beneath the surface, felt the pressure of the water on his chest and let it steady his mind. He could hold his breath longer than any of them expected. He had practiced this as a boy, holding air while counting heartbeats, learning the rhythm of fear itself. Above him, the hunters argued. Maybe he drowned. One said, hope flickering. If he drowned, where's the body? Snapped another, frustration biting at his words. A small splash echoed to the left. Deliberate, just enough to make them look the wrong way. Zola had tossed a clump of mud and debris with precision, timing it to coincide with the leader's heartbeat. There, a hunter cried, pointing blindly. Over there. Move. They stumbled toward the noise, stepping on roots and into shallow water. Zola allowed himself a small smile. Every movement, every sound was a trap within a trap. The swamp seemed alive now, not just water and mud, but something older, something that remembered. Vines swung subtly, reeds bent without wind, and the mud whispered under the hunter's boots. Zola waited calm. The leader barked orders, trying to regain control, but every command was ignored by the terrain itself. One man slipped on a moss-covered log, arms flailing. Another fell knee-deep into a hidden pool, screaming as he struggled to get out. Stop! Stop moving, the leader shouted. But his voice carried only fear now. Zola emerged briefly, just his head barely visible above the water. He let the current cover his movement. One hunter spotted him and raised his rifle, but the angle was wrong. The swamp had distorted distance, bent lines. The bullet ricocheted harmlessly. Zola smiled, calculating. Each hunter's position, movement, and reaction had been memorized long before he even stumbled that morning. He had engineered this moment. By nightfall, the hunters were tired, soaked, and paranoid. Shadows moved differently. Every splash seemed like an attack. Whispers of wind sounded like voices. The swamp played tricks, turning imagination into reality. One hunter dared to suggest retreat. We should pull back, he said, voice trembling. The leader's eyes snapped. No, he's still here. We can't leave him. That stubbornness was Zola's ally. Pride blinded them. Hours passed. Stars reflected in black water, broken by ripples as Zola shifted silently beneath the surface. Slowly, he freed one wrist from the broken chain. Iron sank into the mud, gone without a sound. He did not rise. Not yet. From the water, He watched the hunters, their fear, their mistakes, their overconfidence. One man leaned too far forward on a log. Another tried to cross a hidden ditch and got stuck. Every misstep was predicted. Every error had been set up like pieces on a board. Zola let his lips curl into a faint grin. This was the moment the swamp had been waiting for. And Zola? He was no longer the boy they had captured. He was a strategist, a predator, a master of the land that hunted their every step. Suddenly, the leader noticed something, a flash of movement, too quick to be human, too precise to be coincidence. His eyes widened. He's there, he stammered, pointing blindly. Move! One of the hunters yelled, but their movements were chaotic now. Roots, mud, water, and darkness all conspired against them. Zola maneuvered silently, letting panic shape them into traps of their own making. Minutes stretched into hours. Exhaustion made their judgment sloppy. Sweat mixed with swamp water, dripping into eyes, blurring vision, making sound untrustworthy. Zola used it all. A snapping branch here, a false splash there. Every small distraction pulled them deeper into the trap. The narrow ground, the twisted roots, the shallow water, all carefully chosen over years of observation, was becoming a labyrinth of fear and confusion. By midnight, only the leader still had some measure of control. The others were staggering, slipping, muttering, questioning reality. And Zola? He lay just beneath the surface, calm, eyes open, listening to every heartbeat, every breath, every misstep. The swamp had made them reckless. Pride had made them blind. And Zola was ready. This was no longer an escape. This was the beginning of the Ashford Rebellion. The night had swallowed everything. Only the swamp, black as old ink, remained alive. Zola surfaced just enough to breathe. His chest rose silently above the water, his eyes cold and unblinking. Every sound above him, the crunch of mud, the snap of a twig, the shouted curses, was a signal, a puzzle, a confirmation that the hunters had stepped exactly where he wanted. He remembered his grandfather's words. In war, the mind is the deadliest weapon. Numbers mean nothing. Pride is everything. It was time. The hunters, already exhausted, had no idea how deep into the trap they had gone. One misstep, one wrong movement, and the swamp would do the rest. The leader, trying to regain control, barked orders. Stick together. Don't split. But their formation was already fractured. Fear dictated their every move. Zola struck, not with a weapon, not with brute force, but with timing. A false splash here, a snapping branch there, and the hunters ran into each other, tripping over roots, sinking into the water. Panic made their movements chaotic. Bullets fired into darkness, ricocheting harmlessly. Shouts echoed, each sound magnifying confusion. The first hunter screamed as he stumbled into a hidden hollow. Water swallowed him to the chest. He thrashed, fighting the swamp itself, until the roots gripped him like hands from below. He disappeared. Another tried to help, only to slip into the same trap moments later. The third aimed his rifle at shadows that weren't there, pulling the trigger over and over as Zola manipulated the echoes of the swamp, making him think he was surrounded. The leader, now alone, realized too late. His pride had kept him moving forward. His confidence had been his undoing. Zola emerged from the water behind a tree. In the dim moonlight, he looked like a boy, vulnerable and small. But he was a storm. He did not run. He did not hide. He waited as the leader stumbled past, every movement unknowingly guided toward the bottleneck Zola had chosen. A single shout, a slip, and the leader fell, thigh-deep in a concealed pool. Panic consumed him. He struggled, thrashing, trying to aim, trying to command, but the swamp answered only with silence. Zola stepped forward from the shadows, chains long gone, body covered in mud and water. His calm was terrifying. "Stop," he said. His voice was quiet, precise, carrying a weight that made the leader freeze. The swamp seemed to lean closer. The trees bowed. Silence pressed on the survivor like the palm of a giant hand. "You think you controlled me," Zola said. "But this land, these waters, these trees, They were mine before you were ever born. The leader's mouth opened, but no words came. Zola did not strike. He did not scream. He let the fear do its work. One by one, the hunters had fallen, not by sword, not by bullet, but by the mind and environment they had underestimated. By dawn, only Zola remained. The swamp was quiet. Mist curled over the water like smoke. Broken branches, hidden holes, and treacherous mud told the story of every man who had entered and not returned. Zola walked from the water onto solid ground. His eyes scanned the land one last time. Every detail he had memorized, the roots, the water channels, the shallow pools, was still alive in his mind. The Ashford plantation lay in the distance. Beyond it, the horizon burned with early morning light. But Zola did not look back at it with hate. He looked at it with understanding. The chains had been broken. The hunters had been defeated. The land had done its part. And Zola? He had become more than a boy. He had become a legend in waiting, a mind too sharp to be conquered. The swamp whispered around him, as if acknowledging its new master. And somewhere deep within, Zola knew the war had only just begun, because the most dangerous weapon in history was a mind that refused to be controlled. And Zola's mind was free.